The Pentality of Forecasting. Despite good intentions, there are leaders out there who are trying to look to the future. They tend to be stuck in the present or the past. So quite some time ago, this is in the early 2000s, I decided to come up with a tool that would enable me and others to be able to think more strategically about the future. Penta meaning 5. I've come up with the Pentality of Forecasting, which gives someone a perspective of 5 different areas they should be looking at depending on the horizon markers they have set for the future. And this ties into the retro, current, and future that I've spoken about earlier, as well as horizon markers. Now those 5 are this. You've got you, and that incorporates you, your group, and your organization. It looks at your vendors, suppliers. It looks at your customers, or whatever you define them as, members. That definition, clients. You've got your competition and the universe. And those 5 are the area that I'm going to go over so that you have a better understanding of how to be able to look into the future. So what you'll be doing is taking each one of these areas, and you'll be outlining how far in the future you'll be looking at, and then making projections about them. Now here's the challenge. Most people become comfortable with a certain area, and that's where they want to start. Well, if you've already been used to forecasting that way, what you really should be doing is taking the areas that you feel less comfortable with. And that can tie all the way back to the empowering others. Try something new, and you'll find by expanding your skill set, you'll be able to incorporate much more into your planning. So what we'll do is we'll end up starting with the original, or the first one, which is the you. Now there's you, your group, and your organization. And when I first began or created the you, I thought more about personal or the organization. I realized there were 3 different levels. And the reality came to me one day. I was on the phone with an individual doing an interview, and it clicked that so many of my interviews, at one point, the individual starts talking about themselves and their future, or themselves and how it impacts them. So without realizing it, the focal point is always about you. So let me give you an example that we used in the book and then break it down a little bit. Let's say an individual is talking, they say, yeah, our revenues are down within our business unit, and we're getting pressure for corporate to make some fast changes. I can understand that. Well, let's work with that. And then they say, well, what that means to me is if I don't light a fire under the people that I'm working with, I might not end up with a job in the future, and I'm going to be looking for something else. Well, what that did is it changed from just being about them to being about you. So I broke it down into 3 different categories. There's the you component. Your future, your age, your position, your title, all of those things make a difference in the decisions that you're making. So let's take it a situation today. Today you are 37 years old and you've just gotten married. Your wife is pregnant, or you're pregnant, and you're now looking into the future, 2, 3, 5 years, depending on the horizon markers. You will now have a 5-year-old or 4.5-year-old. You will be 43 years old. Your spouse will be another age. You might have to move because of a contract that you have. All of those things need to be played into any type of forecasting that you're doing, because you as a person will change. The second is you want to be looking at your group. You can do the same thing looking at age. How is everybody going to change within 5 years? You can make projections about lifespan of members that are going to stay around or not. You could look at the products and the services that you're offering and make projections about that. You could take a look at the management team, who's going to be supervising, the people above and how they're going to be looking at you. You could be taking a look at legal positions that have set precedents for the future. All of that type of forecasting allows you to be able to make better decisions for your group. Now, your organization is a completely different animal. You could have 4 people within your group. It could be an operations department, a safety department. Now you expand to the entire organization. And again, once again, based upon horizon markers, you could be taking a look at cash flow, profitability, long-term viability of intellectual property, all of these things will tie into, in the you, into your planning, your alliances you create, the innovation that you deliver. The beginning of Pentality of Forecasting, or one of the key areas that I tend to start off with, is to take a look at the individual. Now let me give you an example of how I use this to kind of wrap it up. I was in Singapore dealing with this guy, happened to be, name is Nick, running an Asian operation for a large group, and he sits down, he says, let's strategize. And he says, this is the strategy I want to employ. I said, wait, before we go there, I jumped to our psychotic strategic thinking model, our tool, and I said, let's start with what's our desired outcomes. And I did that to get a future outlook. I said, let's look into the future and say we were successful. What would be successful to the organization? And I said, let's say we delivered something with $50 million. He said, no, that wasn't enough. We'd have to do this. Say, okay, so the organization in the future would expect for this amount of work, we get this return. And we outlined it. And he said, okay, so now we know that, we could say that we're going. I said, wait, let's take a look at the group. Your group in Asia, what would you have to do to deliver on this? And he said, well, one of the reasons we want to do it is we want to be positioned for. Fantastic, I now understand this a little bit better. And then he said, okay, so now we understand that. He was ready to move forward. And I said, but what about you, Nick? What about your future? And that's when things changed. He said, well, my future, see, I plan on retiring. And I plan on, and I plan on, and I plan on. And so we were better able to understand what had to be delivered, how it had to be delivered, and how we needed to move forward. And that was just one part of the forecasting. So the Pentality of Forecasting gave a little introduction, and the first introduction to you. We're going to move on to the other components of the tool in the next few videos.